September 25th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Looks like we may have a short one tonight. Bobby, call the roll, please.
Marianne Edge.
Here.
Paul Fisher.
Here.
Robert Hartsoe.
Here.
Tundra King.
Here.
Carrie Ann Worley.
Here.
Carla Coleman.
Here.
Fred Stacer.
Here. Okay. Who are we missing besides Darlene?
Rich
Rich
Daly.
Daly, okay. So we have, Carrie Ann Worley and Mary Ann Edge, I'm sorry. Mary Ann Edge. The Carrie Ann, Mary Ann thing gets me a little confused sometimes, I don't know, whatever. Okay, all right, good for you. All right, next item on our agenda is our traditional 30-second moment of silence, so if you would just be quiet for the next 30 seconds, please. Okay, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the July 24th meeting. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion.
Yep. Mr. Hartzell.
Second.
There was a motion and a second. I assume that's to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. We have any corrections, changes, adjustments to it? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on the approval of the minutes, please.
Robert Hartsoe.
Yes.
Carla Coleman.
Yes.
Marianne Edge.
Yes.
Paul Fisher.
Yes.
Tundra King.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley.
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is individuals who will be speaking tonight need to be sworn at this time. So if you are going to speak, please stand and have Bobby will swear you in, please.
Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. First item on the agenda is 200 Park Central, major site plan, PNC 23-124034. Address is 200 Park Central Boulevard. Saul, you're up. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and Board members. I am Saul Umana, planner with Development Services. I haven't presented with half of you, so new faces for me, so nice to meet you all. I'm here to talk about 200 Park Central. The subject site is located at 200 Park Central, hence the name of the site plan. For more context, this is north of Copens, west of North Andrews Boulevard, and south of Park Central Boulevard, where this site connects. For more context, to the left is the existing site, where you can see there is a canal or body of water to the north, and there's a current existing building right now used for warehousing, manufacturing, distribution, and storage. The image to the right shows a rendering view of the northeast bird's eye, where you can see a new parking area, 2 new buildings, and the existing building reduced in size and incorporated into the new buildings. The proposal includes removing 28,705 of the existing building and the construction of 2 new buildings north and south of the existing building for an overall total of 108,705 square feet, or about 40% lot coverage. The height of the buildings will be 35, and this is located on the Office Industrial Park Zoning District, where the uses proposed are permitted. The flow of the loading and unloading will be to the west. No loading and unloading is visible from any right-of-way or any main street. 103 parking spaces are proposed, with the bulk being proposed on the northern portion where the canal currently sits. This needs approval from the county, and the county will be we will require them to get approval from the county prior to them coming for easement amendments to be presented in front of you. Typically, the amendments are presented to you prior to them going to the county. However, we want feedback from the county prior to them presenting to you. If somehow the county needs some changes, those changes will be looked at, and if we need to bring them back to the board, we'll do that, but right now we feel confident that it will remain the same. The AAC, we did review the site plan last month, and the only condition was that they remove the chain link and add a bronze aluminum fence throughout the site. So if there was mention of chain link throughout the site, they will need to remove that when it comes to building permit approval. Should the board find the application has provided competent, substantial evidence to satisfy the review standards for a major site plan approval, the Development Service recommends the following conditions. The first condition was I already talked about when it comes about getting the easements approved. They'll need those approved before coming to getting a building permit approval. The second one was about correcting some sheets for more accurate data, and the third were to get the fence as per the AAC, and the rest are the standard conditions of approval. If you have any questions, the applicants are also here, and that includes my presentation.
Okay, do we have any questions of the staff before we move to the applicant? Did you want to?
You have corrected 4E, I see. In the original staff report, that sentence wasn't completed, but you've corrected it here in your PowerPoint. It stopped in mid-sentence. 4E did, on conditions.
Okay, yes. So it should be saved for the submitted for the building permit approval for the septic plan. Is that right? Is that the one I'm talking about? Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Seeing none, applicant, you have a presentation, or what would you like? Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Toothaker. My address is 501 Southwest 2nd Avenue in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, 200 Park Central. With me this evening is my client, Brian Smith, the civil engineers, Alex and Damon, and Vicky, our architect, and we're all here to answer any questions. First, I'd like to thank staff. Staff, as usual, is wonderful to work with, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here and present this to you this evening. As Saul was mentioning, this is an existing building. This is an existing building with existing uses. This is brought before you because we are making improvements and changes to the site. It is an existing tennis and pickleball. They sell equipment, and there's some courts inside. And it's also tattoo ink bottling, one of the probably preeminent tattoo ink manufacturers in the world. And there's also an aerospace metal processor and distributor, and those are all existing uses that are in the building. Does this work? I have to use the computer? Okay. Okay, I'm going to do my best. So you're already familiar with the site, and staff's gone through a very detailed presentation. So it is future land use industrial zoning, office industrial, OIP zoning. We're not changing any of that. The existing uses and the proposed uses are all consistent with the existing land use and zoning. Thank you so much. So this is the site as it sits today. And as mentioned, we are removing some of the building and putting up 2 new buildings that are compliant with the zoning, compliant in every aspect with the zoning. They comply with the land use, the zoning, the setbacks, all of the site data is completely compliant with your zoning code. We are, I would say probably the biggest amendment that we're making is we are filling in part of the canal. We are replacing the drainage with a different kind of drainage, but it'll still be properly drained. That does go through the county. That's completely compliant as well, and that's to accommodate some additional parking on the site, 103 additional parking spaces. This was reviewed by the DRC and approved. It also went to architectural review and was approved by architectural review. And of course, we're here this evening requesting your support for the project. So this is the overall site plan aerial. And here's the existing view. As I said, it's all existing uses. Built in 1984, and you can see it here. Just existing view to the northwest. And this is the proposed new view. So a significant upgrade to what the building looks like, and how you enter the building, what it appears from the outside. New grand entrance. And you can see some of the architectural features that are being added. And that concludes our presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Before we go to the rest of the board, you're fine, your client's fine with the 4 conditions of staff?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned we accept all of the staff's conditions.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Anybody? See none? Anybody from the audience want to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board, and unless there's any other questions, Chairman will entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that the request for a major site plan, I forgot my cheat notes tonight, major site plan approval has met the conditions and criteria for this board, for approval, and therefore I move approval with the 4 conditions included in staff report. I'd also like to say it's a really nice-looking building.
Thank you.
Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Bobby, call the roll on item number 1, please.
Carla Coltman,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Marianne Edge,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Robert Hartzell,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you
Good
for
luck
your
with your
support.
project.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 2. Scrivener's errors, corrections to a text amendment. And so you're doing this one as well?
Yes.
Okay. So why are we doing this? No, I'm just kidding. Tell us what you want to tell us.
Good evening again. Saul Umana, planner with Development Services, and I'm here to talk to you about text amendments to Chapter 155 of the zoning code. The primary purpose of this text amendment is to correct errors in our code that have either been scrivener's errors or overlooked as previous amendments were approved. I want to clarify for the record that no new uses are being proposed or introduced. This amendment is solely for text corrections. I will walk through some examples of the affected sections, including the table of contents, the overlay district table, Appendix A, which contains most of the fixed errors. Again. The correction to the table of contents, it's intended to align it with the actual sectional headings in the code. For example, Article 9, Part 3 is currently listed as reserved, but the reality is that the title should be measurements for properties abutting the beach. So right now, it says reserved, but we have updated that section to say something else. So we're just correcting that and making that change be reflected. This amendment will correct the use area requirements for residential and non-residential uses in the downtown overlay district. Currently, under the use area for transit facilities, it incorrectly states that residential use is not permitted in the transit facilities. However, the principal use tables within the downtown overlay district says it is. So we're just making that change from not permitted to optional on all floors, because residential is permitted in that district. However, this table says you can't do it. So we're just making that correction. This section relates to the appendix and the abbreviations used in the use table, where P stands for permitted, a blank space means not permitted, and S indicates a special exception is needed. We are updating section E.2 to include language about the transit-oriented district. Currently, the appendix and use standards show transit-oriented zoning districts as a base district without distinguishing it between the east overlay and the downtown overlay. If a P appears on the table, it's important to note that we have to check the actual uses tables on the downtown and east overlay districts for accurate information. A use marked permitted on the table may not actually be permitted on the east overlay, but it may be permitted in the downtown overlay, or it may be permitted in the east overlay in one sub area, but it not may be permitted in another sub area of the same overlay district. So we are just basically saying, hey, I know it says P on the base district, but you really have to look at each district individually to get an accurate reflection. And we already do that with plan developments, so we're just adding TO to make sure that we do that for that as well. Because we already do it for plan developments, where we have so many plan developments throughout the city, but each plan development is different. So we're already doing that. Now we turn to Appendix A, which contains the majority of the corrections. These were included in your backup. These corrections were included, and I just want to say again, we are not adding any new uses. This is just mainly corrections and updating the text. Most of these updates stem from regular errors from either when we have updated it or we just overlooked some when new uses were approved. For instance, the use table was amended in 2018 to differentiate between a convenience store and a grocery store, which previously was under one category. In 2018, we made a distinction between the two categories, but the Appendix A still maintained it as two to this day, as one to this day, and so now we're updating it to reflect it as two different categories. As you can see in here, on the top, it says grocery or convenience store, but now it should really say convenience store. Second, another category, grocery store. So that's kind of the bulk of the changes to that table. We use this table when we do zoning letters, so it's really important for us to update it. When people ask, what can we do here? We usually tend to give out this Appendix A. And so we need to make sure that's correct and reflects the actual code. Given the information provided to the board, the Development Service provides the following alternative motions, which may be revised or modified at the board's discretion. Alternative motion 1, the board recommends approval of the code amendments as it defines the proposed Text amendment consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the review standards for zoning code text amendment. Alternative motion 2, the board recommends the item be tabled to give staff time to address issues raised by the board, staff, or general public. We recommend alternative motion 1.
Okay. Any questions of staff? Yes, Mrs. Coleman.
I have one on the general hospital healthcare uses.
Mm-hmm.
The PDTO, Transit-Oriented Plan Development. Do we have any of those?
Do we have current? No.
But we're going to allow a hospital in one? It already is?
Sorry, yes.
I just want to know where it is.
Sure. So in Article 4, that use is defined and it has standards. There's also a table that provides each of the districts in the city where it may or may not be permitted. In that table, where it defines that use and gives additional standards, it says permitted within PDTO. And then in the appendix, which is where the edit is taking place, it did not list it as permitted, so the appendix did not match what was provided in Article.
I get that, but we don't, what you're telling me is we don't have any PDTOs in Pompano Beach. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Yeah?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Was there anything, any of projects that were not approved or pending, and that's why this came up, or is it just?
No, we just have noticed that we have seen some errors as we do zoning letters, or we just look at the code, and this is the perfect time to finally address that.
Okay.
Okay. Mrs. Edge, did you look like you? No. Okay. You look like you were. Okay, no problem. No problem. Okay. Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 2.
Make a motion that we approve LN 646 text amendment with said changes and corrections noted by staff.
Okay. We have a motion. That's motion number 1.
Motion number 1.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on item number 2.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Mary Ann Edge,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Robert Hartzell,
Yes.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. Next item is item number 3, text amendment, outdoor storage / outdoor activity. You can't fool me, you're not Lauren Gresser. I'm reading this. Okay. Max is up.
Good evening. Max Weems, Principal Planner and Development Services. This is the text amendment for amendments in Article 4 focused on outdoor activity and uses. Similar to the previous amendment, this is something that we've been seeking to do for a long time. Everything that's in here is basically clarifying practices that we already experience and conduct. It's just codifying so that we have less confusion with applicants and less confusion with staff interpretations of what we think our code is saying, and generally we're just codifying expected behaviors. So the affected sections are many. It's several use sections throughout Article 4, and again the objective is to just distinguish between expected business activities performed outside of a building during business hours and permanent outdoor storage of materials, goods, and products. That permanent outdoor storage of goods and products is a defined use in our code. Otherwise, we just say no outdoor activity is permitted. And as you'll see, that's not always feasible. Additionally, we have a new automotive use for vinyl wrapping and tinting facilities. That's a little bit of a unique amendment in this package, but I'll get to that one. And we've clarified that retail showrooms are permitted within retail establishments. That one is really, the language isn't clear, and we have a use for a wholesale showroom, which is an industrial use that provides wholesale. So of course there's also retail showrooms where they do retail sales, and so some people have been of the mindset that when someone submits an application for a showroom in a commercial district, that since it's using the term showroom, it is not a permitted use. So this amendment is purely to correct that one as well. Okay. In the general standards, which is for all uses at the front of Article 4, it does say very plainly, all uses shall be totally and permanently enclosed within a building. So obviously some uses include outdoor activity, industrial processing, marinas, car washes, etc. So we're adding clarifying language throughout Article 4. And we've added a statement in the general standards to say, unless otherwise expressly permitted by the use-specific standards. So you'll see use-specific standards come up a lot. So for example, we do have a use, government maintenance, storage, and distribution facility, that now we want to allow outdoor storage, expressly say that it may be permitted and subject to the use standards of outdoor storage. In the boat and marine uses and motor vehicle uses categories, there's a lot of uses which include outdoor activity. And so rather than classify such activities as outdoor storage, which as I said is intended for storage of finished goods, materials, or merchandise, we've created specific standards within the motor vehicle section and within the boat and marine section to say if you are of this category and have outdoor activity or storage, these are the standards that you shall follow to permit that activity. The uses where we've added those references are boat dry storage, boat marine parts installation, boat sales and rental, marina, and in the motor vehicle side we have car wash and taxi limousine service facility. The new use, the automotive vinyl wrapping and tinting facility, that has been pulled out of a definition for automotive repair and maintenance facility. The repair facility is more restrictive, and in the B3 district, it provides that use may be provided as special exception. Of course, with the repair facility, there's it can be typically a little bit more intense with a window tinting and vinyl. It's a very specific activity, so it's much more predictable in terms of how it'll operate and what the nuisance may be of that use. So with this new use, the idea is to permit it outright in B3 rather than require the special exception approval that's required for an automotive repair facility. And I just wanted to highlight that this was a commission priority raised at last month's commission agenda. Maybe that was actually before the August recess, raised at a prior commission agenda meeting. In the industrial services category, we have uses fuel, oil, and bottled gas distribution, and we have fuel, oil storage. These materials just frequently cannot be stored inside a building. And so we've added clear statements that outdoor storage is permitted with these uses subject to the standards. In a heavy equipment establishment, some of that business activity cannot practically be conducted indoors. And so we are clarifying that outdoor activity can be permitted with these uses subject to the standards. Heavy equipment establishments, the zones in which they're permitted are very limited. So I don't want it to seem like we are now allowing this throughout the city. It's only where that use is already permitted and clarifying that outdoor activity is permitted for such uses. In manufacturing production uses, we have boat manufacturing. So we're specifying that the manufacturing process must be conducted indoors, but any storage of the finished product can be outside, subject to standards. And a heavy manufacturing facility, again, certain manufacturing processes cannot practically be conducted indoors. This use is I1X only, and so in these uses we're clarifying that outdoor storage and activity is permitted. The other similar use to the manufacturing is light manufacturing, and so we're adding a statement within that category to say if any portion of your manufacturing operation cannot be conducted indoors, you're automatically classified into heavy manufacturing, which then limits your locations to the I1X district. And finally, the warehousing and freight movement category, we have outdoor storage. We've added a statement there to clarify that fleets for businesses are not storage or inventory. If it's a vehicle that's operated on a regular basis, that's parked in an approved parking space, it's a car in a parking lot. And so that's been something of confusion in the past. That's the reason it's part of this amendment. And for truck and freight terminals, we have clarified that automobiles, trucks, buses, et cetera, and cargo may be stored outdoors, subject to the screening requirements of the use. Okay, so given the information provided to the board, the Development Services Department provides the following alternative motion options, which may be revised or modified at the board's discretion. Alternative motion 1, the board recommends approval of the code amendment as it finds the proposed revisions consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the review standards for a zoning code text amendment. Or alternative motion 2, the board recommends that item be tabled to give staff time to address the issues raised by the board, staff, or the general public. And staff recommends alternative motion 1. I'm available for questions.
Okay. Who would like to go? Anybody?
I just had one question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
None of these changes change any requirement that buffers against residential are as strident as this board has wanted them in the past, correct?
That is correct. So we have a standard in the general section that says that the perimeter buffer for, I'll use the motor vehicle and the marine because that's the one that's most applied. The standard there is that it's a type B buffer for the use unless otherwise required as a perimeter buffer for the property. So perimeter buffers are required when you have a commercial use adjacent to a residential use or an industrial use adjacent to any other category. And then the perimeter buffers are as they would have always been. So there's no change to the buffering that's required for residential adjacency.
Okay.
And we're also not changing the uses that may be permitted adjacent to residential.
Well, putting the tinting, automobile tinting in a B3 it's very likely to be adjacent to residential, but I don't think that those vehicles are going to be so large that the regular buffer would not cover that.
That's correct. And just to point out that that is a use that is already permitted, but subject to special exception.
Right.
Okay. Anybody? Go ahead, Robert.
I'm just going to ask the same question I asked on the last one. Do you know if there's any projects that are going through permitting now that would either were denied or would be approved with these amendments?
No, nothing comes to my mind. This has just been a long work in progress that we finally found the time to pick up.
So it's housekeeping.
It's housekeeping.
Yes. Sedge, go ahead.
I'll start with the question about tinting, since we were just on that topic. Looking at this, and maybe I'm not seeing the whole thing, but looking at the provisions written in the section on tinting and where it's permitted, I don't see any conditions or standards specifically referencing the outdoor storage on that one. Can you speak to that a little bit more? Is if
Sure.
they're having the automobile repair and service that's limited specifically to tint and vinyl wrap, is that an option for them to have any kind of outdoor storage or anything like that? And if so, any conditions?
Sure. So in the header of the section for motor vehicle sales and service uses, there are standards for allowing a serviced vehicle to be parked within a parking space for a time certain. So typically when we have these types of service uses, they have a parking lot where these vehicles are stored on a temporary basis. If it were necessary for them to have a storage area for vehicles intended to be kept for a longer period, then we would apply the outdoor storage section as it currently exists.
Would that include equipment and supplies and machinery and anything else as well?
Yes.
Okay. So then in that case, you're not carving out the option for them specifically to get a special exception related to the
Outdoor storage.
tinting use. It would be treated as the outdoor storage.
Yes, yeah, we don't really want to incentivize that outdoor activity. We were really focused on those uses where we would expect it.
That makes sense to me. Thank you. Just for the record.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could you briefly touch on what some of those screening requirements that you mentioned, that we're not changing any of those, that a lot of these where there are some existing screening requirements, just briefly explain what some of those would be?
Yes.
And why they may be sufficient to not need the special exceptions that might otherwise have been required if it was interpreted to be outdoor storage.
Sure. So the special exception for, I'm sorry, are we talking about the tinting special exception?
Not limited to just tinting, but in general, a lot of these have, you reference
Yeah.
the screening section.
Yes,
Can you
so
briefly
outdoor
explain what that
storage requires a type C buffer across the front of a property. And you can see here that this is a 10-foot wide buffer with an 8-foot masonry wall, and then landscaping on both sides. The type B buffer is slightly less restrictive, where it's a 6-foot fence and landscaping on both sides. It's still 10 feet wide. The outdoor storage then goes on to say, if it's a interior side, then it can be a type B. If it's a street side, it can be, I'm sorry, it can be a type A. If it's a street side, it can be a type B. And it's just a really kind of, to me, it's a not ideal situation for a change of use of a property where all of a sudden we're introducing a variety of perimeter buffers for a new business. And so to clean it up and make one standard type of perimeter buffer that's required for a variety of uses that we are comfortable with is the approach. That's really the change.
Okay.
It's type C versus type C generally.
Okay. Everybody done? I had a couple of things. What is the tallest, I know it got into the heavy uses like with cranes and stuff like that. What's the tallest wall that we actually allow or use for like in an I-1X or something like that?
So in an I-1X, so the tallest wall that we permit in industrial is 10 feet.
Okay, so
And
10
for
feet.
outdoor storage, we require that anything stored outside is less than
Low.
the height of the screening. The only exception that we make for that is in I-1X for the heavy equipment establishments and the heavy industrial manufacturing.
Like a recycling plant where you have something that's fairly tall.
Yeah.
And it's semi-outside. It might be inside, but you can see it from the outside.
Yes.
The way they run the
And
business.
that is our standard practice, now codified with this amendment.
Okay, okay. And I noticed, the only other thing that I noticed, and I had a couple of discussions with different commissioners about this, but that there was several discussions on the more, I don't know, innocuous type of things like the heavy, large equipment and stuff, where it says with an approved site plan. So some of that's gonna, obviously you guys try to buffer everything out, but eventually somebody's gonna have to come and we're gonna look at it and go, okay, this might be a little bit, we might feel it's a little too aggressive or something like that, if they didn't quite meet everything or something like that. So we have some.
It's not so
say.
much to put the onus on you to say what's necessary for these sites. It's more that we have, believe it or not, several properties in the industrial sector that have never been site planned. And then when we get a change of business, that's our opportunity to say you need to bring some of these features into compliance based off the use-specific standards for the use that you're applying for. So if they're not able to meet that criteria, then we have to deny the application or site plan. And so that's the opportunity to bring the site into compliance and to ensure that the site is appropriate for the use.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize we did, but that's probably a really important thing to do, because those are the ones that can get out of control pretty quick if they don't have some restriction on it. So anyway, I think they were a little bit assured at the higher level that when I said, listen, these are going to come through site plan approval, and staff does a great job of pushing back, but we'll have one more shot at them too, so whatever. So anyway, that's my whole comment on that. Anybody else? Seeing none, then Chair will entertain a motion on item number 3.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Coleman.
I'd like to make a motion that the board recommends approval of the code amendment as it finds the proposed revisions consistent with the comprehensive plan and meets the review standards for a zoning code text amendment.
So that's alternative motion 1?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Bobby, call the roll on item number 3, please.
Carla Coleman,
Yes.
Paul Fisher,
Yes.
Marion Edge,
Yes.
Robert Hartzell,
Yes.
Tundra King,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Worley,
Yes.
Fred Stacer.
Yes, thank you very much. That's the end of our regular agenda. No one here tonight, so I guess audience to be heard will be very short. Do we have any reports from staff? Mrs. Dolan, I thought you just came down to visit or watch or something, no? Okay, he has a report.
Thank you, Chair. Jean Dolan, Development Services. I don't know if you remember, because it seems like a long time ago when we were together last. But we were having a discussion about what cities, how do they review site plans, and what cities take their site plans to commission. So we did a poll. We got responses from 22 cities and the unincorporated area of Broward. And we were kind of shocked and appalled by this response. So there's 3 cities that don't go to any boards with their site plans: Oakland Park, the unincorporated area of Broward County, and Coral Springs. They do everything administratively. So that's interesting. Only 2 just do P&Z like we do, us and Lighthouse Point. Lauderhill takes all their major site plans to commission, and then they have some minor ones they do administratively. Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Pembroke Pines, Tamarack, and Dania all have like a criteria, and some is like, if you want to. It's very strange. So the commission approves PDs and then some site plans. Like in Fort Lauderdale, they have this kind of like call-up thing where they show the commission the agenda and they can just choose, like, oh, I want to see this one, I want to see this one. So I don't know that our applicants would be really thrilled with that. And then there's actually 12 out of these 23 jurisdictions that do take their site plans to commission, which we were really surprised by. And they're not all small cities. So Weston, the town of Southwest Ranches, Coconut Creek, Cooper City, North Lauderdale, Davie, that's not a small city, City of West Park, Lauderdale Lakes, town of Pembroke Park, Parkland, Margate, and Miramar. Miramar's certainly not a small city. So a lot more than we anticipated do take site plans to commission.
Does that say commission only? I can't read it, the corner.
Yeah, it says commission. That means that only the commission reviews site plans.
So there is no planning and zoning board review?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, I
No
didn't realize there
wonder
was so
we're
much
doing
variability.
so well.
I think we're doing it right.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so, but there's a lot of nuance. Like, what would happen is I would get one email, and they'd say, oh, yeah, we don't do that, or whatever. Then I'd get another, but sometimes when this happens, then we do that. And then they'd send another. And also, so there's a lot of, we really boiled this down to something basic, because if we if we try to explain what every city does with all their little tweaks and turns, and I think we have a very clear process. And I've had developers say they really like, because we have deadlines and when something's due, and when you get through this is the date you go to this, and this is the date you go. It's very regimented and controlled, and I didn't realize there's so much variability in other cities' processes. So,
Wow.
but anyway, this was the information you were asking for.
Absolutely. That's good info. I appreciate it. That's very surprising too to me. That
When these
doesn't
are
sound like a good way to,
quasi-judicial.
yeah, that sounds pretty
Yeah.
arbitrary. I bet you the attorneys in the cities really love that. Oh, yeah, maybe you come here. Who told you that? Staff? Yeah, okay, great, yeah.
And some people's criteria was,
I think I'll go to the city attorney instead and see what
they
happens.
say, oh, you go to city commission if it's controversial. Like, what? When do you find that out?
Wow.
Yeah.
You frame it as it, by default, goes to the commission unless they elect not to, and then, oh, good, look, good, you don't have to go. That's
Oh, really?
a win if you, I'm just speculating. That's the
Yeah.
same thing, same result. But if you frame it to the applicants as, assume you have to go to commission, and then maybe you get lucky and don't. It's the same thing.
Well, this is the thing that I find, at least, I don't know, I've been on this board, I think, since 8, so what is that, 16 years or something? Because the city commission is the appellate body to our site plan, right? If we do it and somebody doesn't like it, then they go to the city commission, and that's happened in 16 years exactly 0 times, you know? So I'm just saying, I think we're doing okay, but that's just my own opinion, so. Anyway, I appreciate the information. That is really surprising. I guess I was as surprised as you are with that, so.
Well, let me ask, though, doesn't Weston just like outsource everything?
Yeah, Calvin Giordano's their staff.
Right. So they don't even, as far as I'm concerned, don't really count in this. They don't have a
Right.
regular.
Weston was also a DRI. I mean, that was a
Yeah.
planned community. I don't think they have a whole lot of new development going on. Everything was kind of build it and they will come, and they did.
You know, maybe in another 15 to 30 years, when they start redeveloping places, they may look at things differently. But, you know, there's a lot of those cities on that list that are either very small or are, like you say, another situation with not nearly as many land uses as we have here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Is that at the end of your report?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on this side? Okay, no. Bobby, you have anything for us tonight? You're good? Counselor? No? He's looking at his clock. What, you got a baseball game on or something that you're trying to get to? What's up? Okay. All right, next item is board member discussion. Mrs. Worley, anything? Okay. Mr. Fisher?
No report.
Okay. Mrs. Coleman? Do you-
I'm good.
Okay. Mrs. King?
Nothing tonight.
Okay. Mrs. Edge?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Mr. Hartzell?
Just one thing, council, last time we met 2 months ago, and I really did miss last week, last month, I was really disappointed. I get excited.
I was in Ocala, man. I was glad we didn't meet.
I told my family I was here, so I didn't have to go out to eat with everybody. So, but last time we met, you were going to get us a cheat sheet so that we were more accurate in our rendition of our motions. Like tonight, we failed to say competent substantial evidence.
Yes,
And I think that was one that I saw you smiling over there like, oh boy. So there was plenty of competent substantial evidence on that item, but any way we can get a copy of that?
Yeah, staff and I are going to work through that and make sure you get it.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Chair, I have my own cheat sheet that I made up 3 or 4 years ago, and I just forgot to bring it tonight.
I see everybody with them once in a while. I'm like, oh, I'd love to have that, just so that we're on board and we don't walk into any problems.
Officially, and
Because lawyers, they'd like to look for those little things.
Yep.
It's just those thousands of pages of reading you do when you go to law school, right? And some of us like living in the gray. Okay. Well, I have nothing tonight. I know that's a big surprise, but, and with that, I guess I have to push the button. Right?
In the microphone.
Oh, did I put it close enough?
Yeah, do it again.
Ta-da!